Hey there, thank you so much for downloading another episode of Considering the Source. I'm your host, Scott Roark. It's now time for part 2 of my conversation with my friend Doug. Now, a cool thing was, Doug and I had talked in part 1 about the high school that he and I had attended in Mount Vernon, Ohio. And the nice thing is, this past weekend, Doug and I both, as well as a number of our friends throughout the United States, actually converged on this little town in Ohio. It's just a tiny little town, but there's this boarding academy that's been there since the 1800s. My grandparents went to it, aunts and uncles attended, and a lot of my friends, they're like second, third, or fourth generations who have been going there. So this was the closing weekend, and it was a really it was a powerful weekend. I really wasn't expecting some of the emotions that actually that I felt even while I was there. And especially after I left, because the school is closing, and so I know that there are people that I saw this weekend, close people, that I probably won't see ever again on this earth. And that's very sad, but I don't know, I guess as I say, that's life. But one person I did see when I was there was my friend Doug, and it was a cool little experience to be able to see him there again. So I'm going to go ahead and play for you part 2. Now, in this episode, Doug's going to give us a little bit more information about his time in Desert Storm. Now, where we left off last time, he had just gotten the call, and he and his family are all very, very concerned. And as we were closing the last episode, Doug really talked about his mindset, and that is, I'm going to get home, and it doesn't matter to me how that occurs, it's just going to occur. Now, after he talks about Desert Storm, he's going to talk about some of the things that he encountered now when he returned. He talks about a marriage and what went right and what went wrong there. And he talks about some jobs that he had. And then finally, he closes up our episode with what I think is the high point. It's a really cool ending to this story that I think is pretty cool. I hope you guys enjoy it too. So I'm not going to keep rambling on here. I just want to tell you guys to please enjoy this this next episode. This is my friend Doug.
As it turned out, I never set foot on their soil.
Did you even leave the States?
Yes, I did.
Okay, and you went where?
Let me back up a little bit and say that during my reserve tour, we had a new commandant of the Marine Corps, and he decided that all Marine units were going to be special operations capable, which means every unit would have some sort of, special operations expertise. Okay. So our unit was mountain warfare, cold weather.
Oh, okay.
So at that point, we did training in extreme cold weather, Norway. We spent time in Norway in the mountains. Wow. Climbing and skiing and ice climbing and doing this and doing that. So I was what they called a lead climber. I was the first guy up.
Wow.
I went to a school and got certified and trained to do that. So anyway, I tell you that to tell you that
there's a lot of cold mountains in the Iraqi area.
Yes.
Yeah.
Not the kind we were on, but a lot of mountains
yeah.
for certain. So when we got activated, we were late in the game. I mean, the ground war was getting ready to happen when we got activated.
Okay.
We were one of the last units called up. And somewhere along the line, they shipped us out to Camp Lejeune in North Carolina.
Okay.
And we were at that point the only active duty on the base, besides just essential people to keep the base running. They ended up sending us, I'm sorry, I got a little bit lost in my thought.
Yeah.
They told us that there was a NATO obligation, that we had sort of a commitment to this NATO operation.
Okay.
A war game, essentially. And that we needed to go participate in this war game as part of keeping the coalition together of all these other countries. And the way they explained it was, if we can't participate in our obligation to this war game, which was planned way before the actual war,
yeah.
Why would they participate in our war?
Oh my.
See what I mean?
Yeah.
So they said it was very important for us to participate in this because we sort of had a prior obligation.
So play our game.
To participate in the game. So
yeah.
if we play in the game, which had, Germans and Norwegians and Swedes and all these other, countries up north participating in it.
Yeah.
And basically that was their way of testing their preparedness against a Soviet attack.
Okay.
So it was important to them.
Gotcha.
Maybe not so much to us at that point, but it was important to them, and we needed to fulfill our obligation to them, or it could jeopardize their participation in our bigger, actual, real war.
Right.
So while everybody else was in Iraq and Saudi Arabia,
Yep.
I got to go to Norway. So we went to Norway, and we spent, several weeks up there doing this war game. And while we were there, the ground war actually started. And I remember, any chance we could get to watch a television or anything to see what was going on, because at that point you can't get enough news.
Right.
So we wanted to see what was going on, what's going on. So every time you got a television to look at anywhere, and the reason you could have a television to look at is because in Norway they don't have bases like we have. The war game actually happens in the general populace. You're running through towns and cities and villages and
what?
You're sleeping in people's front yards.
No.
Yeah, it's crazy.
How long does this whole war game take?
Yeah, several weeks.
Okay.
Several weeks. And it was I think it was in January, February.
Okay.
So the coldest part of the year.
Nice.
Actually, the first night we were there, a guy froze to death.
What?
In his sleeping bag. They found him in the morning. He wasn't in my unit. I didn't know the person, but...
It was an American?
Yeah, he froze to death. At that point, the gear we had was actually antiquated. It was like all Vietnamese, Korean stuff. From,
my
50-year-old gear. This guy apparently rolled out of his sleeping bag. He didn't have it zipped up all the way, or, who knows what happened, but his bag wasn't rolled up and opened up, and it was 30 degrees below zero. So they just found him in the morning.
Oh my God.
So it was serious, cold.
Yeah.
Anyway, when the ground war starts, I'm as far away from the ground war as I can be.
Yeah.
Basically, we're up in Norway. And when we left to go to Norway, they actually put all of our stuff in a warehouse and said, we're going to Norway, we're going to do that, and then we're getting into the war.
Okay.
Now, what I later found out was we were supposed to go to Turkey and come in through the mountains because Hussein had all of his defenses down south.
Okay.
And he was wide open up in the north.
Okay.
Since we were a mountain warfare unit, we were going to come through the mountains and bring people with us.
Yeah.
So that was the plan. But what actually happened was, once the war game was over, they put us in an airplane hangar at the airport, and they had so many flights going back and forth that were tied up with equipment and food and, all the things that it takes to put on a war, that they couldn't find a flight to put us on. So we sat in an airplane hangar for the better part of 2 weeks, just waiting.
Oh my.
Just waiting to go. And eventually, the ground war started, and when the ground war started, they gave up as quick as they could.
Yeah.
And it was over, in just a few weeks. So by the time they could get us transport, they basically put us on a plane and flew us back to North Carolina.
The war was over for all intents and purposes. Yeah.
So it was quite an experience, because you leave home thinking, okay, I could possibly die, and then
you're just playing cards in a hangar,
cleaning weapons, waiting to go, and actually, the post-traumatic stress I suffered, if you want to say so, was more of that when I came home, I felt like everybody else in the military went over there and did their job.
Yeah.
And I was a Marine. I should have been over there doing my job with them. I felt like somehow I was a lesser person, a lesser Marine, because 99% of our armed forces was over there, and I was the 1% that was sitting in the snow. And I felt like I didn't do my job.
But you had no say-so in what your orders
It's
are.
True. It took me probably 3 years to come to that. I just felt like I was a failure as a Marine because I didn't go participate with my brothers.
Yeah. Did you ever receive flack from anybody about it?
No.
No,
but
it was just all internal.
I usually don't talk about it because, when people say, well, what did you do? I sat in an airplane hangar in 30 below degree temperatures. Oh, so you weren't, I've got a national defense ribbon that says I was involved in Operation Desert Storm, but really I didn't do anything. I didn't die, I didn't kill anybody, I didn't really defend my country in any way. I sat in an airplane hangar playing cards and cleaning my weapon.
Yeah.
So it took me a long time to just get over the fact that I didn't do anything wrong.
Correct.
I felt like I did something wrong.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't there, doing what everybody else was doing what I trained for years to do.
Right.
Everybody else was doing it, I wasn't. I felt like I did something wrong.
And at that point in time, you suddenly, it almost sounds like your attitude had shifted. Like, initially when you're leaving, you're terrified, and here we are maybe a month or two later, and there's almost this, like you're almost angry that you didn't get to go and do more.
Yeah, I was upset. Not that I wanted to go take a person's life, but I felt like every other Marine in the world is over there. What am I doing here?
Yeah.
I don't belong here. I belong over there with them.
Yeah.
And so...
But I think that's an incredibly honorable position to hold. I mean, you're not running to Canada. You're not.
No, when they called me, I went. I didn't know what was going to happen.
Right.
But, the fact remains I didn't feel like I did my job.
Yeah.
And it didn't bother me so much until I actually got sent back home, and people said, "Oh, what happened? What'd you do?" Everybody wanted to know.
Yeah.
I didn't have a story to tell. I didn't have a story that I felt proud of.
There you go.
To tell.
Yeah.
So for the most part, I didn't really say anything.
Yeah.
Just let it go.
Like I said, and you understand that you're simply following orders. It's not like you were intentionally just hiding somewhere. Mm-hmm. So you get back home, and how long until you're actually out of the Marine Reserves?
I actually overstayed my enlistment.
Is that right?
By like a month or two.
And so
by the time we got back home, basically I got back home, and then the next month when we had our reserve meeting, that was when I got discharged.
Mm. Was Gerald in your unit as well?
Mm-hmm.
So he was there with you in... Oh, okay.
I don't know if I can tell his story, but it's a funny one. He didn't do anything wrong. But Gerald was always a bit of a husky kid.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't want to betray any confidence, but I'll tell you what I think I can tell you and be okay. He was a bit of a husky kid.
Yeah.
And not out of shape or fat for any means. In fact, he was one of the physically strongest individuals I've ever dealt with.
I would have never crossed him.
Mm-hmm. And in fact, we were in 29 Palms one time, and they had a game we played bull in the ring. We have like two guys wrestling, almost like sumo wrestling. You got to throw the guy out of the ring. Nobody could throw him out of the ring. And then he started taking on 2 guys at a time, and 2 guys couldn't throw him out of the ring. He finally took on 3 guys and broke his ankle.
Oh my.
So anyway, he wasn't fat, he wasn't out of shape, but the Marines have a physical model, if you will, of what a Marine is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
In body composition,
in
body structure. And he didn't fit that model, so they were, I don't want to say constantly, but occasionally they would get on him because we'd have to fit in our uniforms or do something, and his uniforms would fit him too tight because he had gotten so big.
Yeah.
He wasn't fat, he was just big. He was a big kid. And but because his uniforms didn't fit him, now he's fat. So you don't look like a Marine. If you don't look like a Marine by the next time we have to do this in 6 months, we're discharging you.
Yeah.
So in 6 months, he would get himself down and lose some weight.
Yeah.
6 months later, he'd be back in the same boat again.
Yeah.
So he went back and forth with this.
Mm.
And eventually, the commander we had said, listen, if you don't lose the weight and keep the weight off, we're just kicking you out. We're discharging you. Not dishonorable, just discharging you.
Gotcha.
So 6 months came and went, and he hadn't lost the weight.
Yeah.
And he had to go in front of the commander, and the commander said, well, you know what? You are a good Marine. We're going to give you another 6 months. And by that point, he had had enough of this. And he just said, you know what, respectfully, you threatened to kick me out. I just assume you just go ahead and honor your word and get me out of this because I'm tired of going through it.
Yeah.
So he got discharged maybe, I don't know, 6 months, a year before this all stuff happened.
Okay.
They just let him out.
Okay.
But it wasn't, dishonorable or anything.
Yeah.
They discharged him and gave him a general discharge and let him go. They might have given him an honorable discharge, I don't know.
Okay.
But, so he didn't go with us because he had his own journey.
Yeah. So you get out, and so we're at, what, 92, 93, something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. When do you make the decision like this? I'm in love with this woman, and I want to get married.
I always saw myself as being a person that was going to be a family man, and I didn't find anybody that I connected with on that level. Probably around 90, I met a girl that I was really fascinated with, and we dated a little bit, but I don't know, never really connected. I don't know, it was, I liked her. I think I was probably more infatuated with her. She was interesting to me, but we just never really clicked. So it didn't really go anywhere.
Yeah.
I bumped into her probably 10 years later, around 99.
Okay.
And bumped into her. We started dating. At that point, I'm 30-ish.
Yeah.
And kind of feeling like, I need to settle down.
Okay.
I say that now to say that maybe I was looking for something and maybe not looking with my eyes wide open, because I did get married in 2001.
Okay.
And then, I don't know, 4 years later, we divorced.
Can we talk about that?
Yeah, it's not a real interesting story.
I'm going to make it interesting.
Okay, well, you ask the questions and I'll answer them.
So in 2001 you get married.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any part of you like, this might not be a good idea, and you just kind of suppressed it?
Well,
I mean, what sign did you see in 2001 that you said, I'll change that, or I can live with that?
Okay, so there was some red flags going off along the way. And I think what happens is, I almost feel like love makes you a little stupid.
Yeah.
Or that kind, puppy love, whatever you want to call it. And you just want to see the good. You just want to see the best in the person.
Yeah.
And even though you see some things that maybe make you raise your eyebrow a little bit, make you go, but she's a good person. She's
her drug habit.
I love her.
Her drug habit isn't that bad.
Right. So there were some things I saw along the way that maybe I should have paid more attention to. I guess that's...
Such as?
Man. She lives locally.
No one knows who this is.
Okay. She was, I'll just say it for what it is, not to be mean.
Yeah.
She was a bit of a slob. She was very lazy.
Okay.
And what that translated to, I mean, when I say she was a bit of a slob, she was probably borderline hoarder, like stuff all over the place.
Yeah.
What it translated to in our marriage was, I felt like I was the only one participating in the marriage.
In what capacity?
Well, in the stuff that needs to get done.
Okay. Paying bills, cleaning.
The work that needs
yeah.
to happen in a home. Mowing the lawn. I did all the traditional, if you want to say the traditional man stuff. I mowed the lawn. Pardon me if I sound chauvinistic, but I mowed the lawn. I shoveled the driveway. I took out the trash. If there was painting, if there was, that kind of work that needed to be done, I did it.
Right.
In addition, I always like to cook.
Okay.
So I did all the cooking.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're going to do all the cooking, you probably need to buy the groceries, right? Because you know what needs to go in the food.
Right.
So I bought all the groceries. So I was always working.
Would she at least do the dishes?
No, she'd let them stack up to the ceiling. She'd go stack up to the ceiling.
And you still never hit her. I'm kidding.
Oh, goodness.
I'm kidding.
No.
All right. So think, Doug, what did she do?
She paid the bills.
Okay.
On the internet. She'd pay the bills. That's about it. She paid the bills.
Did you guys get along? I mean,
for the most part, we got along. The problem I had was that my home wasn't what I thought home should be.
Yeah.
You know, home is where you go. In my mind, home is where you go. That's your place of solace.
Yeah.
That's your place of peace. That's where you get away from what's going on out there in the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And that's not what my home was. You know, she had cats. She couldn't empty the litter box. My home reeked of cat urine. As soon as I opened the door, I got hit in the face with it.
How many cats are we talking?
She had 2 cats.
Just 2?
Just 2 cats.
Did she want more, but you put your foot down on 2?
Probably, yeah. I should have put my foot down at 1.
Because those cat people, 2 is never enough.
Oh, goodness.
They always want more.
Well, probably. I fear to think of how many cats you've got now. But you know, as soon as I would open the door, now, Scott, the litter box was in the basement.
Oh, yep.
It wasn't even on the ground floor. It
Yeah.
was in the basement. And
it would still.
Just empty the litter box.
Yeah.
Just empty the box. So there were certain things I wouldn't do, and I didn't really want the cats.
Yeah.
So those are your cats. That's your litter box.
Yeah, please.
That's yours to take care of.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, a month, 2 months it would go by.
Yeah.
The cats would have crap stacked up to the, you know, the lid of the litter box.
Yep.
And I don't know if she just couldn't smell it.
Yeah.
You know, because I've got a very strong sense of smell, but as soon as I would open the door, that's what I would get greeted with.
Exactly.
So, you know, we would talk about it. I wasn't much for arguing and yelling and hollering and screaming, but I would talk and just say, listen, I need some help.
Right.
I need some help. I don't need it to be 50-50 down the line. I can live with 70-30.
Yeah.
Just help me here. Do something.
And would she tell you she was going to change?
Sometimes, you know, she'd cry a little bit and say, okay, you know, I'll change. But at some point, it felt like getting a promise from a 3-year-old. You know? It really didn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And I think I drew the line. I guess my breaking point was when she wanted to have kids.
Because you're not wanting to bring kids into this.
I wanted children, Scott. I wanted kids from the time I was a kid. I thought my purpose in this world was to be somebody's father.
Yeah.
And I just said, there is no way I'm going to bring a child into this mess.
No,
I want to be a father. I didn't want to be your father, is what I told her, actually, at one point. Because that's kind of what I felt like it was. I felt like, you know, I didn't have a partner, and I feel like a marriage should be a partnership.
Right. 2
people working together to make something good for both of you, and your children, and your family, whatever it is. And I felt like I was working all by myself, and I had no partner in the relationship. She didn't participate in the relationship. And then I kind of found out that there was an alcohol problem going on, sort of behind my back.
She had hidden that from you?
Well...
Or you just hadn't been aware to see the signs?
A little bit of both, I think.
All right.
I knew she liked to have a little bit to drink, but I guess my first eye-opener came. I had a wine collection.
Okay.
Past tense.
Okay.
I had a wine collection. Now, I don't drink a lot, but I like food, and food and wine sort of go together.
Yeah.
And I was in this club, and they would send you a couple of bottles of wine every month. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was really cool because they would send you the bottles, but they would also send you like a little flyer that would tell you all about where it came, because it would come from like little wineries throughout the country or throughout the world.
All right.
Stuff you can't get in the grocery store.
Yeah.
And so they would give you the wine. I don't mean to make this a wine commercial.
No.
But they would send you the wine, and you'd get your little bottles of wine, and they would send you a little one-page flyer that would sort of describe where it came from.
Okay.
And I'm sort of a geek like that. I like to know the background on things.
Uh-huh.
So they would tell me all about the winery that it came from and the climate and how long they've been there and this and that. And then you flip it over and it'd have a recipe of something that would pair well with that wine.
Okay.
Right up my alley.
Yeah.
So I didn't drink a lot of wine, but if I went to a friend's house or something, I might take a bottle of wine just for a gift or, you know, to drink socially. But I ended up having probably close to 40 bottles of wine. Mm-hmm. I had a nice wine rack down in the basement, and I just, you know, it was sort of like my little baby down there, and I loved it.
Right by the cat litter?
Close.
Okay, good.
Yeah. So anyway, one day I come into the kitchen, and there's a wine bottle sitting on the counter. And I sort of recognized it. Mm-hmm. It wasn't something from the grocery store. It was out of my collection.
Okay.
So I didn't have any of it, mm-hmm. and it was empty.
Okay.
So I went and talked to her about it, and I said, if you want to have some wine, go ahead and have some wine. Could you please not drink my collection?
Yeah.
And, okay, yeah, sure, I won't drink your collection. So, I don't know, at some point down the road, I went downstairs and looked, and there was not one wine bottle on the shelf.
Like 40 bottles she had gone through.
Yeah, she must have been hiding the bottles, when she drank them. And I guess it was easy because I worked my job. I would leave in the morning before she went to work, and I would come home after she did. So she had time, and maybe I was stupid for not seeing it. Maybe I was not as involved as I thought I was. But how does somebody drink 40 bottles of wine and you don't know it? So she drank every last bottle of my wine, and then she had a computer room where she would sit, because that was her thing. She'd sit on the computer and mess around. And Heineken bottles, it was a sea of Heineken bottles. And I knew she would have some beer every night when she was drinking.
Yeah.
Or drinking, yes, when she was messing around on her computer, but I didn't realize, I guess, the extent of how much really she was drinking, and that's kind of all she was doing, was drinking and playing on the computer and paying the bills, and then I got the rest. And after about 4 years of that, I just decided, I would rather end this now. And over that time, I tried everything that I could think of to try to help. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of decided it'd probably be better to end this now than to wake up 30 years from now and know that and realize I hate the person that I spent the rest of my life with.
Right.
So.
And this was the woman that maybe 10 years before you'd been so intrigued with.
Yeah. I was completely fascinated. She was an interesting personality, but
right.
She just wasn't the person I was supposed to marry.
You went behind the veil, and it wasn't the same kind of interesting that you thought it was going to be.
Yeah, and if I had looked at some of the warning signs, I might have not done that. So
that was here in town.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what took you to Phoenix?
Well, after I got out of that relationship, I think it was a matter of I was just too close to all of that.
You needed a break.
And I had a buddy out there, and he was working for a construction company, and they were looking for some managers.
Mm-hmm.
So I went out there to visit them a couple of times, and he introduced me to his boss, and I guess at some point in time, I decided that Phoenix didn't seem like such a bad place. They kept saying, you need to get out of there. And I said, okay. So his boss offered me a job. And I had a job here I'd been working at for 15 years.
What were you doing here?
Sales. I was working in sales, project management here. I'm not going to name the company, but I worked in sales and project management, inside sales, outside sales, and government sales. I had sold, I guess a lot of what we sold was in the construction field, so I picked up print reading and things along the way.
Okay.
So I talked to his boss in Arizona, and they offered me a job. So I quit my job after 15 years. I sold my house. I rented a house out there and paid rent for a full year ahead.
Yeah.
I paid for a moving truck. And, I don't know, a week before I was supposed to move, the guy called me and said that the corporate office sent back the paperwork and we're not taking any new hires on. So at that point,
oh my!
I was so committed to going.
Yeah.
I sort of had to go, but I went out there
without a job.
No job. The best thing I did was pay my rent ahead of time for a full year because at least I didn't have that stress. But yeah, I went out there with no job. I felt like the machine was on and running, and there was no way to really turn it off and go back.
And you got that call how long before the actual
Like a week before I moved.
Oh my
And this was.
Did you try to see about getting the money back from the house, and it just wasn't possible, or you didn't?
No, I just felt like I was so committed to it, I couldn't back out. I had to go. I had quit my job. Like I said, I quit my job. I sold my house.
Yeah.
I had all this money out there that I couldn't get back. Felt like I had to go, so I went.
And what job did you finally end up finding?
Well, I struggled. This was around 2005 when the economy started to go in the tank, 2005 or so. And, there really wasn't a lot to be had out there. And I think the first thing I got was I sold cars, which is a horrible thing, at least from my standpoint. All the stereotypes about car salesmen, I just found out that at least where I worked at, they were all true. So I sold a lot of cars, but I didn't make a lot of money because I wasn't that greasy guy who would, take your firstborn and your house to sell you a car. Actually, when I realized, because I thought when I started there that they were going to be a little bit different and maybe not what I thought they would be. Yeah. When I found out that they were, I would actually set my customers up to succeed because I guess I have ethics, Yeah. And so I didn't make a lot of money. I would actually tell the customers, don't buy this car until you make me come back 3 times. Because if you don't make me come back 3 times, you're not getting a good deal. So I would actually work against myself.
Oh, so when you say come back, you're meaning when the whole bill sits
like you give a price and the customer says, oh, that's too high, and you got to go back and get another price and come back.
Yeah.
I would say, don't buy the car until I come back 3 times. Because if I don't come back 3 times, you're not getting a good deal.
Is that right?
So I would actually take money out of my own pocket so that I could feel good about selling you a car.
Oh, wow. So if I ever buy a car again, make them go back 3 times?
Well, they're kind of changing the way they're doing things, but I would say that's a good start, a good try. But a lot of places now, they're going to, our price is our price, and you buy it or you don't. So they're kind of trying to get away from that. Negotiation tactic. But at that point, that was the old school way was still in effect, and I just, I wanted to feel good about what I was doing, and not just the fact that I was making a big paycheck. So I would tell people. And then I would send them into finance. Now, this part you can take with you. Okay. If you go in the finance department after you buy the car, that guy's going to try to sell you a bunch of other stuff. Yeah. And if he tries to sell you a bunch of other stuff, he'll try to do it real quick and say, just sign here, sign here, sign here, or which one do you want? And they kind of run through the process so quickly that you're on autopilot by that time because you've just spent 4 hours sitting in a car dealership and you want to go home. Yeah. So I always tell people, when you go into finance, be patient and pay attention to what you're looking at, because you could end up walking out of there with $5,000 more spent than what you thought you were spending on the way in, because that's how he makes his money.
Is that right?
So I would tell my guys, if he's got anything with a dollar sign next to it that he wants you to sign or initial, pay attention to what that dollar sign is. And if you don't want that, then tell him to stick it in his ear. Yeah. Because he's just going to assume, he's going to run under the assumption that that's what you want. Well, he doesn't care what you want. No. He's just going to run under the assumption that you're nodding your head and he's nodding his head and he's going to say sign here and you sign there. Well, you just signed to buy something else that you didn't even know you were buying. Mm-hmm. So I used to set that guy up to fail because I just spent 4 hours making a relationship with somebody across the table from me, and I didn't want that guy to mess up my relationship.
Sure, because they're gonna blame the whole thing on you.
Right. Well, that's what happened a couple of times, and so then I finally thought, okay, I'm going to start while we're waiting to go into finance, I'm going to tell them what not to do when he gets a hold of them. Right. So.
How long were you selling cars there?
Probably about 6 months. Okay. But I just wasn't making a lot of money at it. Part of it was because of the way they did business, because they would sell cars to people who had no business getting that loan. Yeah. And then a week after they sold you the car, they'd call you and say, you got to bring the car back, or you have to bring us more money. And I just thought that was a dirty trick to pull on people too, because what do you do when you get a car? First thing you do is you go show it to everybody, right? Yeah. Yeah. Hey, look at my new car. Well, what happens a week later when somebody says, bring the car back? Well, if that guy didn't have real good credit, you shouldn't have given him the car to begin with.
Exactly. Now
he's got to go answer it to his friends about where his car just went. Yeah. I just didn't think that was right. No. So I think at one point I had like a week where I had 10 cars sold or something, and then 9 of those cars came back. So
Because
I went from having a nice paycheck to having nothing, because when those cars come back, you don't get paid.
Yeah.
So
Did you ever have to owe money back?
No. They didn't pay until after the loans went through.
Okay.
But I went from having, a nice paycheck to having no money at all. And I still had bills to pay. So long and short was, I sold a car to a guy.
Okay.
And he worked for a restaurant chain out there. And he was a manager.
All right.
And he really liked the way I dealt with him.
All right.
And he came back numerous times to get his oil change or for whatever reason, and every time he'd come back, we were friends.
Yeah.
Because I treated him right.
Yeah.
And he'd say, "Man, are you sure you want to do this? You should come work for us.
Okay.
Come be a restaurant manager." Well, I didn't have any experience in the restaurant world. But after so long, I finally thought, you know what? Maybe I need to go work in the restaurant world. So he came in one day, and I said, "Okay, I'll talk to your boss." And that's how I got out of the car business.
And so you go to work for this coffee.
No. This was more of a quick serve restaurant.
Okay.
And it was actually a chain that I like. They don't have them here in Ohio. I like them. I think that the chain has very strong values, and I would stand behind them.
All right.
I worked for them for a couple of years. The only reason I stopped working for them was because they were 24/7, 365 or 364. Seems like whenever there's trouble, it's at nighttime. And it seemed like I couldn't get a good night's sleep without getting a phone call and having to go into work. And I got to the point where I couldn't even sleep at night, because if the phone didn't ring, I was laying there waiting for the phone to ring.
Right.
And I got to the point where I got burned out. I just absolutely got burned out because I couldn't sleep because the phone was ringing, and I couldn't sleep because the phone wasn't ringing, and I was at my wit's end, because I couldn't get the right people on my night crew that could run things by themselves.
Right.
So I eventually got burned out, and then I got recruited at the same time. I got recruited by
this coffee store.
The coffee store.
The coffee chain from Seattle.
Yeah.
All right. How was that?
They're the Antichrist.
Okay. Why? Why Antichrist?
Okay, maybe not that.
Maybe not that. Okay.
But you know what? After being exposed to them for a couple of years, my feeling was they do a fabulous job of marketing themselves. They put a great image up there in front of the public.
Yeah.
Behind the scenes, I've never worked for such a place that at least my experience. People with personal agendas, backstabbing, it was just the most betraying type of environment. It just seemed like everybody had their own agenda, and that's what they were concerned about.
You were hired as
a manager.
Was there like a general manager as well of your store? Assistant managers.
Yeah.
But did you have a general manager over you that handled your store and a couple other stores?
I forget what they call them now, but I think they call them a territory coach or a territory manager. But yeah,
and did that person
that person had like 10 stores that they oversaw.
And were they a backstabber as well? They had no.
I felt like they were.
Okay.
I felt like they were. I was instructed to do. Well, let me give you one example. When I first took over my particular store.
Yeah.
When I came into the store, there were some procedural things that I saw that weren't okay. Now, it wasn't my opinion that it wasn't okay. It was food safety things that the health department would get you for. Now, they weren't endangering anybody's lives per se.
Yeah.
But the little things that the health department will come in and ding you on.
Yep.
Okay. So when I came in the store, they didn't know me, and I understood that. But I am the manager, and I'm accountable for those things. So I would try to say, okay, you need to do this, or you need to do this, or this isn't okay. Here's how we're supposed to be doing it. And my boss, because right away the grumbling started. Right, this new guy's coming in here. He's trying to change everything.
And the grumbling is going from the people below you to
right over my head
to the coach.
Right.
Okay.
And my boss said, "You know what? let the assistant manager do that stuff. You need to work on forming relationships with your people, getting to know everybody. Don't worry about that other stuff. You need to become their friend, basically.
But the health inspector is going to ding you, not the assistant manager.
Right.
But let the assistant manager be responsible for doing that stuff that you're going to be dinged for. Okay.
Right. So, and the assistant manager was there before me, so this was the stuff that the assistant manager was allowing to begin with.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to make corrections to things that I know aren't okay.
Yeah.
So it's not like something where I say, I'd prefer you do it this way. It's got to be that way.
Right.
Not negotiable.
Yep.
So anyway, we go 6 months down the road. And I'm still being told this, and my assistant manager, let's just say she didn't like me for her own personal reasons, which you and I talked about a little bit, and we can get into.
Okay.
But we got inspected. We had an audit. And in our audit, we got dinged for some of these things that I tried to call out early on.
Yeah.
So now who gets to go in front of the regional director?
You.
To answer for the state of my restaurant.
Yeah.
So now, my boss is treating me like, how come you let those things be?
Because he's now in front
You're
of you.
the one that told me to let them be.
Right. And you told him this.
Well, no, I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't throw her under the bus.
Oh, it was a her. Okay.
Yeah, it was a her. I didn't throw her under the bus. Maybe I should have, but she's still my boss.
Yeah.
So I was trying to be respectful, and I basically just said, okay, I'll get it all fixed. I'm sorry, I'll get it fixed.
Right.
But she was the one who handcuffed me to begin with and said, don't fix those things.
Yeah.
So that was one experience I had, and of course I told you, and I don't know how to say this without sounding like a bigot, but
you had a number of employees that were gay.
I was in the center of that lifestyle in Phoenix.
What does that mean? Like Phoenix has a large homosexual community?
Well, Phoenix does. I mean, I don't know if they're larger than anybody else, but birds of a feather flock together. So the homosexual community tend to be amongst themselves. Now that doesn't mean they were excluding other people. No. But they like the same things. They like to be in the same places.
Sure.
It makes sense.
Sure.
So I didn't have any problem with that. I was told that I was going to. They actually nicknamed it the Gay Bucks. I was going to. Well.
You didn't mention the name. That's
right.
fine.
I was going to the gay store.
And when you said they mentioned it, that was from
anybody who knew where I was going.
So even in
that
corporate,
store
it was understood.
Amongst the other managers, it was pretty much understood that that was the gay store.
Now, I presume there were gay and straight employees.
There might have been a few straight employees. I mean, yeah, there was probably a couple of straight employees, but
the majority were gay.
The vast majority were gay.
All right, and what were you getting pushback?
Well, I wasn't obviously. Maybe not so obviously, but I'm not gay.
Okay.
But I'm not going to sit here and say I know a lot about the homosexual community because I don't. Mm-hmm. But I went in with an open mind.
Okay.
Okay, because as far as I'm concerned, we're all people.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to try to learn about them and I'm going to try to be friends with them and I'm going to try to get to know them. My customers, I don't care who you are.
Yeah.
I'm going to smile and tell you to have a nice day.
Right.
Thank you for coming. So immediately there was resentment towards me as their manager.
Just because you're their manager or because you're straight?
Well, I guess it would depend on who you ask, but I was actually told by my assistant manager that I was the only manager at that store who was not gay. And that they did not like the fact, now, not my customers, but the staff did not like the fact that I wasn't gay.
Because? Just because, or no idea?
No. Just because I wasn't gay. Now, I didn't discriminate against them. I didn't judge their lifestyle.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, we're here to do a job.
Yeah.
Let's do our job. What you do on your time is your business.
Yeah.
And if anything, I tried to reach out a little bit to get to know them and learn about them.
Yeah. You wanted to make it a good situation for everybody involved.
There's no reason. I didn't see any reason for anybody to hold anything against me any more than I was going to hold their lifestyle against them.
Yeah.
But my assistant manager pretty much told me in no uncertain terms that we don't like you because you're not gay.
And this was your assistant manager was lesbian, or okay?
Yeah. Actually, at that point, I think I had all women except for one.
So it was predominantly lesbians that you dealt with
at my store,
and then a guy.
And he was also gay.
The guy was gay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was very nice.
Sure. Okay. All right. How long did you work there?
About 2 years.
Really? And was it bad the whole time, or did it continue to get worse?
It was like the elephant in the room. When we were out in front of customers, we played nice. I don't want to say we played nice. I didn't ever go after anybody. I didn't care about that. Mm-hmm. I was there to work.
Yeah.
But there was always this resentment. I mean, you could feel it.
Really? When you left that job, is that when you came back to Ohio?
Yeah, that was when my mom passed.
Was that sudden?
Unfortunately, no. And I say unfortunately because she was diagnosed with a sickness. It took probably 4 years to diagnose her. It was like chasing a ghost.
Really?
It initially almost mimicked a stroke. If you saw her, if you listened to her talk, if you watched her move around, mm-hmm. you would almost wonder if she hadn't had a stroke.
Okay.
I'll try not to make this too long, but it sort of progressed. And we got her to the hospital, we got her checked out. She was living in Pennsylvania, so they took her to Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. They took her to University of West Virginia in Morgantown. They brought her to the Cleveland Clinic here and had her looked at. Nobody could figure out what was going on with her. Eventually, after running numerous tests again, they diagnosed her with something called MSA, which is multiple system atrophy.
What does that mean?
Well, do you understand atrophy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so atrophy is, for those the listening audience, when things in your body, particularly muscles in general, if you don't use them, you sort of start to lose them. They start to break down and basically go the other way and turn into fat, and you lose strength. So when you have multiple system atrophy, it's all the systems in your body.
Brain, heart,
everything is shutting off.
Wow.
Little by slowly.
Yeah.
And when they told her this, they also told her that her chances of getting this, how should I say? They told her chances of winning the lottery twice were better than the chances of getting this disease once.
It happens so rarely.
So rarely. Unfortunately, on a side note, I have a good friend who was just diagnosed with the same thing.
When did you find this out?
About 6 months ago.
How old is that person?
About 50. Probably 55.
So, you find out your mother is sick. Do you immediately come at that point in time and move back, or it took a year or two to...
No, actually, there was nothing I could do, and I was out there. I was just trying to keep my head above water.
Yeah.
So I came back for visits. They said her
prognosis?
She would likely live somewhere around 7 years.
From the time they first diagnosed it?
From the time they diagnosed it.
Okay.
They had an average, but based on where they saw in her progression, they figured she had about 7 years left to live. She was married. She had my stepfather with her. Different stepfather.
Different stepdad, okay.
So he was taking care of her. So I stayed where I was at and came to visit as much as I could and talk to her as much as I could. There wasn't a lot else that you could do for her or with about it. It was going to happen. There was no questions about it. There's no cure. Mm. All they can do is treat the symptoms, and you're going to die. That's it. That's your prognosis. You're going to die.
What was
the
her
question is when and what's going to kill you.
What was her attitude?
Well, I think probably typical for anybody that gets that sort of news. You know, it stuns you at first, and then you go through many different progressions depending on the day and how you feel.
Yeah.
So some days she'd be making the most of the time she had left and having fun and living life, and other days she'd be bitter and sullen and you know, wanting to fight with anybody that walked into the room. And, you know, it went from one end or the other kind of at random. You didn't know,
Right.
which one you were going to get on any given day. You know, and everything in between. So, but it basically turns your body off. And I guess it's a cousin to Alzheimer's. I think that's what it is. So I liken it to if you turn your water on at home full bore,
Yeah.
and every day you come back and maybe you move the knob towards the off direction
Yeah.
in such a small turn that you can't even tell you turned it.
Right.
That's sort of what hers was like, you know.
And as
every
time is
day
going on, it just got
she's shutting off, but it's in such small increments you can hardly notice it unless you go away and come back in 6 months.
Yeah, and then
you come back in 6 months and you go, oh my goodness, you know, she's not going to make it much longer. So you come back 6 months later and you see that she's gotten worse, and then you go, oh my goodness, she's not going to make it much longer. And then you go away and you come back and you see it and she's even worse. And you go, oh my goodness, how long can this go on? And it's just continually.
Did she make the 7 years?
Let's see, that was about 05. No, I think she died in about 5 years.
How many of those 5 years? How much of those years were you there to be able to be with her back?
I wasn't there. I was still living in Arizona, but I was, you know, coming and going as I could.
So when she did finally pass away, you were still living in Phoenix, or you had moved at that point in time?
No, I hadn't moved. I was still working at the coffee place, and she got put in the hospital, and I actually left on very short notice because we thought that this was going to be the time.
Yeah.
So I literally left overnight.
Wow.
And came home, and we spent about a month with her in intensive care, and you know, she continued to go downhill.
Yeah.
And I guess it took about a month, and she passed.
Based upon the way your father had passed, I'm going to presume that you were deliberate about when your mother passed, that she knew you were there.
Yeah, actually, she was conscious and alert when I got there, and then over that period of time, you know, she kind of faded away. But my brother Randy and I were there with her, and when she died, I was with her. I was in the room with her. Randy wasn't able to be there, and my stepfather just couldn't do it, and I wasn't going to have her die alone.
Yeah. Was she conscious?
No, she was probably brain dead at that point. Her kidneys had shut down, and I think at that point she was kept alive by mechanical means.
Yeah.
And that was not her wish. She wanted the machines turned off. So when they turned them off, I stayed in there with her, and it took about an hour and a half.
Let me ask you a question.
And it's not like you see it on TV.
Meaning?
They don't just close their eyes and go to sleep.
Did she fight? Did the body fight?
Yeah, it was frightening.
Frightening how?
Well, I don't know how graphic you want me to get here, but I guess you can edit it out if it's too much. But when your body is dependent on the machines to breathe for it,
yeah,
I think and I never talked to anybody about this, but I think what happens is it sort of becomes reliant on that, meaning her natural instinct to breathe for herself sort of went away.
Yeah.
So when they turned off the machines, she started to convulse after a little while because she didn't have air.
Yeah.
I'm supposing. I was just sitting there watching it in horror, but she was jerking and like she was fighting for air, but she didn't know that she needed to do the breathing.
Right.
So that happened for probably a minute. Well, I don't know. They turned off the machines, and then it probably took a minute or two for that to happen.
Yeah.
And then eventually she started to breathe for herself. But it was not like you and I breathe. She would breathe a big deep breath, and it's funny, they had a tube coming out of her, and there was a rubber band on it for some reason, and I could see the rubber band vibrate with her pulse. And that's how I knew when she was not there anymore. The rubber band stopped moving. But she would breathe, and I would count, the beats.
Yeah.
And it would take about a minute and a half before she would take another breath.
Oh,
She'd just
wow.
take one big, and then she'd just lay there for, what seemed like way too long. And you'd just be waiting for that next breath, and it wouldn't come, and then finally she'd take a big breath. And she did that for about an hour and a half. And I just sat there watching the rubber band and talking to her and crying and telling her I loved her.
And is this just you? There's no nurse, there's no...
Just me.
It's just you and your mom.
Just me and her. And, I probably cried a river of tears that day.
Mm-hmm.
And wanted to make sure she knew that she wasn't alone and knew that I loved her. And eventually the breath didn't come, and I kept watching the rubber band.
Yeah.
Because they turned off all the monitors and stuff. So eventually the rubber band just wasn't moving anymore, and I knew she was gone. They still had monitors on her, they just turned them off in the room. So about the time I suspected she was gone, the nurse came in and said, she's gone. So then they gave me a few minutes to say goodbye to her,
Right.
Well, as much as I needed. So I said goodbye to her and kissed her on the head and closed her eyes.
Is she buried someplace around here?
She's in Pennsylvania. They have a family
Plot
out there, so she's out there.
So that was in 2005?
About 10.
2010. So it was a few years ago.
I forget all the dates and times. I'm terrible with them, but it was right around Valentine's Day.
Well, I want to end this in what I think is a really cool aspect. And that is, if memory serves, back in 1985, when you were working at Camp Mohaven, were you and her name is Honey, were you guys dating then?
Yeah, actually, we met in '83 at Academy.
At the Academy.
And it's funny because, are you related to the Snyders?
Yes.
Okay. Jenny.
Uh-huh.
Honey sort of had a crush on me, and I sort of had a crush on Honey, and we were both too shy to do anything about it.
Mm.
And we were in the cafeteria one day, and we hung around the same people, so we would eat together and we would do things together, but not just together.
Right.
We were always in a
group.
crowd, so we were with the group. And everybody knew we liked each other. And Jenny orchestrated this thing where we went into the lunchroom and we all sat down to eat lunch. And I think they all got to the table before we did. So they made sure that the right two seats were still open.
Uh-huh.
And we sat down, and when we sat down, everybody got up and left. And just left her and I sitting there.
Facing each other.
Facing each other, yeah. So at that point we sort of thought, well, okay, I guess we have to talk about this. So we dated. We got together almost immediately and dated, and we always liked each other. And I forget why exactly, but she left the academy. That was her freshman year, my sophomore year. She left for 2 years, and then she came back. Well, I guess she left for 1 year. She came back.
Her junior year, your
her
senior
junior year, my senior year, yeah. And at that point, she was dating another guy.
Mm-hmm.
Or she came back while I was actually at home. I went home for some reason, wedding or something. I don't know what I went home for, but I went home for something, which was unusual. But when I came back, she had come back.
All right.
And in that time that she was back, she started dating Joe, who I think you know from camp as well.
Paulson?
Yeah.
Okay.
They dated.
All right.
So by the time I got back and figured out that she was there, she's already sort of coupled up with somebody.
All
so
right.
I wasn't real happy about it, but it wasn't really any of my business.
Okay.
So they dated pretty much the whole year and broke up right before school was out.
All right. And so now you guys are going to work at camp together.
Now we go to camp to work together, and
love is in the air.
It was just sort of a natural fit for her and I.
All right.
We always liked each other.
And I remember that, even because now I know Honey from Zanesville.
Right.
And I was in 2nd grade, and I think she was in 3rd grade. So I feel like I've known Honey for a long time. So I remember as a camper saying, oh, and I can remember like thinking like Doug and Honey sitting in a tree, you know, that's how immature that I was. But all of a sudden now, your life goes one way, Honey's life, because I'm presuming that after camp, that relationship was over.
Well, what happened was we were going to try to stay together.
Okay.
But she was in Zanesville.
Yeah.
I was in Cleveland.
Yeah.
So we're 3 hours away from each other.
Yeah.
Okay. And in the 80s, especially when it's the 80s and her family didn't have money and my family didn't have money. Today, kids have cars.
Yeah.
Kids have cell phones. Back then, you couldn't even call long distance. I don't know if you remember
No,
long distance.
Yeah.
But if you dialed 1,
Yeah.
you better have a good reason for it. Somebody better be dying.
Yeah.
Right? So I couldn't even call her on the phone because she was so far away.
Yeah.
So we wrote letters and things, but we didn't really get to
You can't have a relationship like
have
that.
a relationship. So at one point, a friend of mine from camp, who lived in Cleveland, she was trying to set me up with one of her friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want to cheat on Honey, so I actually called Honey and said, I think that this is probably not going to work.
Yeah.
But I did that because, truth be told, I was kind of attracted to this other person, and I kind of felt like it was inevitable that we were going to go out at some point. I didn't want to cheat, so I broke up with her, which probably wasn't nice. I went back and saw her. Well, I didn't go back and see her, but I went back for alumni weekend at Academy a couple of times. And one time I went back, and I think at that point in time I was single.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen her for years, but for some reason I went back and I wanted to find her.
Yeah.
So everybody I saw, I was asking, did Honey come? Did Honey come? And she had come. At that point, she was married and had, husband, 2 or 3 kids, and it was really awkward. And she would tell you the same thing. We both just felt very uncomfortable about it. So, I said hello and gave her a hug and kind of got myself out of there because it just didn't feel comfortable.
Because she was married, or just because of the time?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was the fact that she was married and I was walking in there with sort of like remembering the old days.
Sure.
And it just didn't occur to me that she'd be married and have kids,
Yeah.
So I just said hello to her, and we both just kind of felt like it was really awkward. And it wasn't something that had to be spoken. She felt it as well as I did, and I just kind of said hi and made chit-chat and then found somewhere else to be.
Yeah.
And that was actually before I got married. And then I guess we fast forward to, I don't know, probably around 2011?
Yeah.
After my mom passes. I came home. while I was home dealing with my mother's situation, it
Yeah.
just kind of occurred to me that I felt like this is where I belonged. Nothing against Phoenix or the people in Phoenix, but it just never really felt like home to me.
Yeah.
So I found a job and came home, and met up with her again on Facebook. Actually, the job I had me traveling.
Okay.
I was living with my stepfather in Pennsylvania.
All right.
But I was working in Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Kentucky.
Yep.
So I was driving back and forth all the time. And as luck would have it, I was going through Zanesville and thought, I'm going to look up your cousin.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
Is that your
That's
relation?
right. Yep.
Okay. I'm going to look up Jenny. And so I called her and stopped by and visited her because I was just on my way back home or something.
Yeah.
I stopped by and visited her. I hadn't seen her for years.
Yeah.
And of course, Jenny is just Jenny. She's always the same.
Yeah.
And so we had a really nice visit, and I asked her, what's Honey doing? What's she up to? And at that point, Honey had gotten, she was no longer married.
Yeah.
And she told me that Honey was, closer to here.
She was in Akron.
She was in Akron. And so I actually confessed. I think I confessed to Jenny because the time Honey and I were dating, I don't think I ever told her I loved her. I don't think we ever got to that level of speak.
Yeah.
And I told Jenny, I said, I never told her that, but I did. And she said, well, you ought to go find, you ought to go look her up. And I didn't look her up, but a little while after that, her sister friended me on Facebook. And I was talking to her about Honey and just saying, I always kind of felt like she was my other piece, the piece that made me complete. Yeah. We were good together. And I said, why don't you pass my information out to her if she's interested to talk to me. And shortly after that, I got a friend request from Honey, which didn't come from her sister. It was just by coincidence.
Really?
But yeah, I got a friend request from Honey, and the only reason Honey got on Facebook was because she couldn't make it back to her class's 25th reunion. Yeah. And the class president said, hey, if you can't make it back, at least get on Skype, get on Facebook so we can talk to you. Yeah. Because they had a Skype set up at the school. And so she got on Skype, and then they encouraged her to get on Facebook, and she got on Facebook, and she just happened to find me. Yeah. Because we have a lot of similar friends, or the same friends. So she looked me up, and I became friends with her, and then we started talking back and forth, and then we started calling back and forth, and then, I was up in this area working at some point. Yeah. And I said, how about if I stop by and say hello? And at that point, I think it all got really real for her, and she panicked for a second because, I hadn't seen her for the better part of 25 years, right? 30 years, right? Once or twice. So we ended up meeting out in Medina, and just went out and had some dinner, walked around, and just kind of got reacquainted. But it was It was like. I don't know if I could say like riding a bike because that sounds a little wrong, but it was sort of like that. Like we met, she took my hand, I took her hand, and off we went. And it was just like the 30 years had never even happened. Really? It was just like that's where we belonged, and we knew it. So we saw each other for 4 years. Yeah. And this past, I think it was January. Yeah, it was in January. There's a big, I think they call it Winterfest down in Columbus with all the gospel, the Christian artists come. Skillet. And King and Country, and everybody was down there. We went down there, and I proposed to her at the concert.
Is that right? What's the date?
September 26th.
Is there any significance to that date?
We both like the fall.
Okay.
And it's let's see, it's late enough to not be hot and early enough to not be cold.
Nice.
So it'll be comfortable for everybody. And it's just we both like that time of year.
I love it.
So,
for me, watching it, because I kind of watch it happen on Facebook, and so it's cool for me, like I can remember watching on Facebook and seeing like pictures of you guys together, and honestly, Doug, there's this part of me like I want this to happen. Like I genuinely was like pulling for you guys, like I wanted this to happen. So the fact that you guys are scheduled for September, I'm thrilled for you. I really,
thank you.
I really am, dude. I want to say thanks for coming in. Thanks for doing this today. I think your story is good, and I think that I think your story will actually affect people. And I know that it's hard for you, maybe, as it is for anybody, when they tell their story to see how it can be a benefit. But I'm confident that it will be. So thanks for opening up and sharing. I really super appreciate it.
No problem. I mean, you're my friend. When my friends ask me to do things for them, I generally do, so it doesn't matter that I haven't seen you in 25 years.
Right.
You're still my friend.
Yeah.
That's how I feel about my friends.
Yeah.
Distance and time doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
You're still my friend. If I don't see you for another 25 years, you'll still be my friend. I just feel that way about people,
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of friends, but the ones I have, I love.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it. So there's my friend Doug. And I just love the way he ended that, just saying, hey, you're my friend. And even though I may not have seen you in 25 years, you're still my friend. And if I don't see you for another 25 years, you're still my friend. And Doug, I say thank you. I deeply appreciate that. And I also want to say just best of luck to you and Honey. I'm so happy for you guys, and congratulations. So to the listener, thank you so much for listening to another episode of Considering the Source. I want to remind you, please tell your friends. If you like these episodes, if there's one that you think, man, this is really good, or I know exactly somebody who would really benefit from hearing this, please pass this along. Let them know. The more people who hear this, I want you to think about this, the more people who understand about Considering the Source and are listening to these podcasts, I cannot help but believe it's going to change the way they start viewing people. People that they know and people that they don't know. So thank you so much for being a part of this, and please always remember, everyone has a story.